got to have something. You got to have some juice. And no one's got more juice in history, I would say, than a portly little, blue collar worker from, New York. And this movie has defied all expectations, even my own. We'll get to that later, but by the numbers, Super Mario Brothers is part of the reason why theaters are still alive. This movie is making like more money than Disney has seen a debut of theirs make in a long time. This is making Marvel and Star Wars level numbers. Like it's almost to $1 billion. It's halfway there, for crying out loud, and it's barely been 2 weeks. Best opening for Illumination ever. Best video game movie debut ever. I'm just having all these things fly across the screen. Sorry for the audio only people who are joining our listener base. But yeah, there's just a lot happening that makes a lot of critics look really out of touch, because they hated this movie. Their reviews were scathing. They were so dismissive, they were so negative, some were outright hostile, and frankly, I'm just gonna say this, it is just their built-in hatred for all things nerdy. The modern critic class, whether they are old-ass boomers of like Roger Ebert's generation, and even people our age, if you can believe it or not, they have this elitism about video games. It is low culture, it's low art, its storytelling is shit, the people who play it are contemptible, and they just don't have a high view of the whole industry, even though that industry is taking their lunch 2 ways to Sunday every single week. When you look at the grosses of an average video game versus the entire film industry coming out of Hollywood. But yeah, when you look at the disparity between aggregate scores and audience reactions, what does that tell you? Especially when you look at the box office results it's been having.
Yeah, well, I think Rotten Tomatoes is it's a pretty awful company and a pretty awful service for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that is interesting, or that makes it interesting, is analyzing trends. And I was sort of looking into this yesterday, and I was looking at a bunch of different movies, at their audience scores and their critic scores, and I kind of noticed a couple things that I wanted to sort of get off my chest here. So when you look at the audience scores and critic scores for all types of different movies, the trends that it shows is that audiences tend to love action films, animated films, and raunchy comedies more than critics. And films that, with high audience scores and low critic scores include things like The Boss Baby 2, We're the Millers, the Uncharted movie, the Smurfs movie, and Venom. And when you look at what critics like in general, they tend to prefer slower cerebral horror films, indie thrillers, and drier comedy films. So if you look at the movies that critics tend to love that audiences don't, you're going to see stuff like It Comes at Night, the Coen Brothers movie Hail Caesar, Jordan Peele's Us, The Nightingale, and Mohawk, that indie thriller from a couple years ago. And so I think it really all just boils down to entertainment value versus artistic value, and that's what you see with those trends. And so critics are looking for that next thing that's gonna drive them into a hole of depression and make them look at their life in an existential way. And audiences just want to go to the theater, get 2 hours of air conditioning, and be entertained for, they want the entertainment value. And that's kind of what it boils down to, I think.
And because their tastes are so divergent, it does kind of create this situation where, stinging rebukes from critics are taken as ringing endorsements by audiences, if they're even paying attention to what the critics are saying anyway. It is a meme where it's like, oh, so-and-so said this movie sucks, it must be great, I'm gonna go see it now. Where it's like they're almost doing it out of spite because there's just so much, they just don't trust what this person has to say, even if Rotten Tomatoes will give them the time of day. And I bring up Grace Randolph right now, not to slag on her. Everyone else is doing that enough. But there are just some things she said that were just so categorically like so off base. They were so like flaming hot as a take that the fact that she's just acting like she's still right, you know, in the aftermath of all of this is bizarre. Because like she was saying things like this movie's going to be dead at the box office by Friday, you know, was speaking of Super Mario Brothers right now. And she's like someone who's written comics for the big two companies. She's you know, she's an accredited, like she did something called Superbia that was like such a big hit that it got an extended run as a limited series. And you know, she's, you know, also has her YouTube channel where she does reviews called Beyond the Trailer. And I don't bring her up to send anyone over there to like make fun of her. Everyone else is already doing that. It's an industry to chew on the chaw that this woman gives us. Because, yeah, like saying things like Matt Vogel's never going to work again, that this is the worst thing Illumination has ever done, when they have movies like Hop and those Minions movies, you know, like in their credits. Like, those are categorically bad movies. I don't know if you've ever seen Hop,
No.
Matt. It's really, it's not a good movie. It's the definition of shovelware. And with Grace Randolph getting so unhinged and off the chain, it did just boil down to this movie is catering too much to people I don't like, and I assume I don't like them because of their politics, and because this movie doesn't cater to my politics, I'm gonna, you know, just burn the whole house down. And after seeing this movie myself, I guess we'll kind of, you know, get to that after a little bit more discussion. But I don't like, because I saw this movie because of her reaction. I was willing to wait to see this thing until it was like free for me. But then I was like, no, it's Easter weekend. I need something to do. And I went to go see it. And my God, it is not the experience that is being described by some of these people. But are we sick and tired of just people, you know, getting histrionic over critics not liking things? Because like I watched a lot of that and I got really bored with it very quickly.
Yeah, well, I had honestly never heard of this woman, so I went over, you know, to look at her YouTube channel quick, and you know, just kind of a quick scan of her YouTube channel, and you can tell that she's you know, just a YouTube grifter who like contrarian, you know, typical contrarian who she bases her opinions based on what's going to get her views, essentially. And so for me, it was a pretty like open shut case of just, you know, 3-pointering her into the garbage can and never going back to her channel again. But, you know, you had mentioned about how people, you know, take critic rebukes as like a endorsement to go see the movie. And I think this particular movie was always going to be untouchable, like no matter what, like no matter what score it got. This was, because it's Mario, this is like the definition of a 4-quadrant movie where you have, you know, the nostalgia for the men and the women over 25, and you have the current Mario games, the kids with their 3DSs and their Switches for all of the kids under 25, the boys and girls. And so it's just the definition of a 4-quadrant movie, and so this movie was always going to do well. But I do think there certainly are people out there that would go see this solely because they think they're making some sort of political statement by doing so, or some sort of, you know, by giving the film their $8 or their $10, they're somehow contributing into some sort of political cause.
I'm voting with my dollars.
Exactly, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think there are people out. I mean, for me, there's people like that where, you know, if I see that, for instance, Emmanuel Levy or Cole Smithy, those are like two of the big reviewers out there that if I see them give a positive or negative review of something, I know that my opinion is going to be the opposite of whatever they said, because they're such awful contrarians, and their tastes are they're so eclectic to the point of being stupid, or just complete stupidity, because they have such weird tastes, and they're off their rocker. But so yeah, I mean, there is people out there like that, but I think this film in particular was always going to do well.
And it's because of like what makes it a 4-quadrant movie. It's because so many generations have such a lived experience with the brand. Like we make fun of Disney adults. Nintendo adults are also a force to be reckoned with in this world. And they have been dying for this movie ever. Like, that movie came out when I was 3 years old, and we have, like I haven't even watched it to completion. I've only ever seen it on TV. You can't buy that original movie, like on any platform right now, not even on Amazon. Because like Angie is one of those people who unironically loves the original movie with Bob Hoskins and Leguizamo, and she can't even satisfy that itch and watch that. Because that is how much Nintendo doesn't want people to remember that one. You can't find it because because they are desperate to take advantage of their brand in all of the ways that one should. If you are Mickey Mouse, why don't you have a theme park? Okay, good. If you are Mickey Mouse, why are you letting these weirdos in France, put fart jokes and like licensed music montages in your Mario Brothers movie? Like there's certain things that like as a company you have to stop. So I understand like why they got so involved, because it's not just Mario, it's the whole video game industry is where I'm kind of getting at. There's a lot of other 4-quadrant properties out there that aren't Marvel and aren't Star Wars, and they belong to either Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo, and they are players now too. So like, is Hollywood finally gonna get over this hump of having to only adapt things that are clearly just video games that wish they were movies to begin with? Because we've seen, because like The Last of Us is obviously an example of a success of that kind of a paradigm. But like, what else are we going to see Hollywood embrace going forward with Mario being so successful?
Yeah, I think, there are certain video game genres that lend themselves better to becoming an adaptation. And I think like story-driven third-person or first-person games, adventure games, I guess like story-driven walking simulators is what they're called. Those types of games, they really lend themselves to being adapted. I mean, there's certain stuff that I don't think we're ever gonna get adaptations of, and not everything needs an adaptation. That's something they should realize.
That's the important part,
Yeah, we don't need a Bejeweled movie. We don't need a Peggle movie.
We don't need a Need for Speed movie.
We don't need a racing game movies. Even though we're gonna get a Gran Turismo movie here soon. Or like RTS games, like we don't really need movies based off like Command and Conquer, that type of thing. And so,
but those cutscenes are so great, Matt. Yeah. That shit's my childhood.
Yeah, no, you're right, but they should remain as is. I think they should remain in the 90s. And I mean, the key to a successful adaptation, I think, is what we're seeing now is getting the original creators involved, because that is the thing that unites the Mario Brothers movie and the Last of Us TV show. Because you need to get the original creators involved. You can take their word with a grain of salt if you want. You can treat them however you want, but they should be involved in some way, because I mean, at the end of the day, whoever's directing the film should get final say, but you have to get these guys involved.
And that's, I guess, with The Last of Us, what they were able to do with his involvement was bridge the gap between gameplay and the drama, to take the perspective out of the player's head, and into the character's head. Like, that's how they overcame that hump. Because a lot of video game movies, like Doom, for example, are just like, oh, let's just force the gameplay into the movie in a way that doesn't serve the movie at all. And so, like, that's why like Hardcore Henry is probably like the best video game movie ever made, because it is not unlike just having somebody else holding the controller while you have a VR helmet on. And like, but that's not necessarily a crowd pleaser either. It's more of an art house exercise versus something that is marketable. So if do we want them to avoid things we've already seen? Do we need another Doom movie? Is Halo off limits now for a while, along with Warcraft and Resident Evil? Like, should they try and bring us something new, or are they just gonna try to do it better with those other properties that they've been fucking up for years?
I think, I would like them to get another crack at The Witcher, because that, that universe is so cool, and there's so much lore there, and there's so many stories there. That is one in particular that I would love to see again. But I mean, there are certainly things that should have never been adapted in the first place. Like, I mean, you had mentioned the Need for Speed movie. I don't think, I mean, Doom is. I don't think there's enough story there to do Doom. It's a fairly, there's a premise there, certainly, but there's no real story there. And so I think they just need to pick and choose their things wisely. I mean, there's certain stuff that should definitely get another crack at, but it probably won't, because at this point, who knows how much longer Netflix is going to extend The Witcher out. I mean, if losing their lead actor didn't stop them, nothing's going to stop them.
Yeah, exactly. Like they'll just march that zombie out there until it's falling to pieces. If there was like one thing that I would expect to happen, it would it's in terms of ones that like haven't been made yet.
Yeah.
Finally getting Metal Gear Solid done is the dream, but it would have to be like a Harry Potter TV show sort of a situation where you just get 10 seasons in a movie, because that's like you can't possibly adapt that story. But I guess it's not going to happen. That's why it can't happen. It's so unwieldy. It's stupid, because it's Hideo Kojima's storytelling. But that said, like Metroid probably has the most real potential. And a lot of these Nintendo properties do, because while there's a lot that you have to honor and and do fan service, for, there's at the same time room to actually put movie, constructs within it and make something out of it. Like no one has properly tried to tell the Samus Aran story apart for Team Ninja with Other M, which was trash. So someone could do that better. Like Samus Aran is a character that probably has some vulnerability that Nintendo doesn't have the emotional capacity themselves to explore, but a movie could. But all that said, I really want a Monkey Island movie. I want a fun pirate adventure film from that universe. Like that's my wish list.
Yeah, that could be awesome. I wrote a couple down here too. I definitely agree with Jack Black. Jack Black has been going around while doing press for this saying that he wants a Red Dead Redemption movie. I totally agree with him there. I think that's one of the ones that I think is like a sure bet. Like you could make an amazing, incredible movie off of that. And then personally for me, I'd like to see are you familiar with the Little Nightmares games at all?
I've never heard of those.
They're like side scroller adventure games with like a really, really messed up art style. Like really, really they remind me of like old Tim Burton designs, you're basically these children like trapped in like a dream world with all of these like adult monstrosities that like chase after you, and that could be really cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have seen this on the Steam store, I think, but I've just never gotten it.
Yeah, that could be cool. I also on my list I also had Metro 2033.
Okay. Yeah.
That could be awesome. That was originally a book too, so that the storyline is there. There's enough material there. And then also a Psychonauts movie. That could be a really great, really great kids movie. A really great kids and adult movie. That's kind of one of those movies that bridges the gap where it's a kids movie, but there's a little bit of potty humor there for the adults. And
Guillermo del Toro, just take that art style from your Pinocchio thing and do Psychonauts.
Yeah, that could be awesome.
That could be awesome. Mm-hmm. But we don't.
And then the last.
Go.
Oh, I was just gonna say the last thing I had on my list was: are you familiar with Disco Elysium?
Yes.
That game at all?
I've been trying. Yeah. I've been playing it off and on for like a year.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't really have the time to sink into it, unfortunately, because I love the storytelling in that, and because it's a point and click like adventure game, but with dice rolls and things like that. So it's like a tabletop game, and I have no experience with that, but you could easily take that world. It's so fleshed out. Those characters are so,
yes,
or it's already there. You don't have to do any work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be one of my go-tos. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of material there. That one would probably lend itself a bit better maybe to a TV show. And there's a central mystery too to that game. You're a detective trying to figure out a murder. And so that's sort of the central mystery of the show. And so yeah, that was kind of my short list of stuff that I would like to see.
But that's what's kind of the funny thing about this, because a lot of what makes those games appealing is that you as the player determine the outcomes, and that's and you shape who the character is, and that's been like the thing getting in the way of Mass Effect happening, because their Legendary has had those rights for over 10 years. I have somewhere in storage a little like Hot Wheels Legendary car that we got at San Diego Comic-Con as a promo item because of the along with a copy of Mass Effect 2 on PlayStation 3, which I still have in the shrink wrap because I didn't have a PlayStation 3. But that's how long they've been sitting on this and doing nothing with it, because they're trying to, because I don't know, they just haven't cracked that nut yet, but it would be cool if they could. But there's a lot of weird things already in production, and things that have been made recently that I didn't even know were video game movies. Like, the party game, like Mafia.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the variation, like Werewolf? Who's the werewolf?
Yep.
Someone made a video game around that premise. So it's basically just an Among Us clone with werewolves, and that had a fucking movie made last year.
Yeah, wasn't that oh gosh, I can't remember his name. Wasn't that like a Jim Cummings movie?
No, that's a different movie.
Okay.
That's a different movie. Jim Cummings is pure. That was a labor of love. Yeah, God, I mean, yeah, because that's like something of Wolf Hollow or something like that.
Yeah, okay, I'm getting them mixed up.
Yeah. This is definitely inspired by a Among Us clone video game that just happened to have werewolves in it, and that's where it's like, okay, guys, calm the fuck down. We don't need that. Give us things we actually care about, things that actually serve the Switch, in medium. Because otherwise you wind up with trash like Dead or Alive or Tekken movies, because nobody wanted that crap. But as we
I know we're getting a Fallout TV show that's coming from Amazon. There's actually already pictures of it, I believe, and then there's the Eli Roth Borderlands movie that's coming out.
That's gonna be garbage. But Sony and Sega both have leaned heavily into this because they're all desperate for cash revenues, as we know. So they have announced that we're getting any exclusive Sony game is probably going to have a movie in development at some point. Days Gone was mentioned. We're always waiting on that God of War movie. But what I found the most shocking was Sega going, "Oh yeah, Comic Zone. We sold the rights to some company, and yeah, that movie's in the works." So if you played Sega Genesis in the back of the day, you can now be excited for the Comic Zone movie, which is, no one's asking for that shit.
No.
But they'll make it anyway. Because of this little man, this portly plumber, and his little brother Lou, as he calls him. This, lots of controversy. Lots of people weren't sure about Chris Pratt's voice. Even during production, he apparently went too Jersey with it. Sounded a little bit too much like Tony Soprano. Because, yeah, he is wearing a spaghetti face in this film. He is a non-Italian, pretending to be an Italian from the Bronx. But the movie itself works only because it achieves that balancing act we had alluded to. How do you take the thrill of playing this game and actually make it a worthwhile movie? And how do you find a story within this? You keep it simple. You don't overburden it with a dense lore that no one's going to remember anyway. You what makes those games work? It's had functionally the same story every single game. Peach, is now one of the boys. She goes on the fights and can fly around and whatnot. But where did we start? We started out with a gross dinosaur who really wanted to marry a princess, and a plumber who somehow gets involved in, stopping this. And they bring in Donkey Kong. There's a whole Kong country that exists, hinting at the larger universe that is there. But none of these characters are anything more than what we know them to be. None of the things they are doing is more than we are used to seeing. If they have them in carts for an extended chunk of this movie. it takes place on Rainbow Road. The training sequence is just, you're just watching like yourself get better at playing a level of Mario over and over again. The iteration, the struggle, like the finally beating that obstacle course, finally beating a Mario game. That is something I, was indelibly burned into my mind when I had my Game Boy Pocket and I beat Mario and the 6 golden coins for the first time. I cried because I couldn't do it. I struggled so hard at doing it. And there's an emotional core in the story of this movie that is there that none of these critics are seeing because they can't relate. They can't relate to that basic joy of just being Mario and doing whatever Mario is doing. And you'll notice in the box office results that outside of the United States, the market that contributed the most money to the haul, the 500 million, was Mexico. This is about Italian plumber. Who would know? Because like Mario is universal, and this movie has something missing from a lot of Hollywood, content these days, even Disney, neutral messaging that no one could be mad at, that anybody can just have a good time with, because it doesn't matter. What's important is all the lights and flashes and the emotional moment when the Mario brothers finally get back together and hug. There is brotherly love happening on screen, and Charlie Day and Chris Pratt sell it, even though they fail here and there along the way. This is not a perfect movie, but anyone expecting a perfect movie was going to be disappointed, no matter what their priorities are. I had fun with this. I don't know how anyone who isn't just a cynical cunt couldn't have fun with this. There's just nothing but joy to be had in seeing all this iconography doing its thing. Hearing Koji Kondo's music in a within a context that like you have no control over this outcome, but you can still get caught up in it, even though the plot armor Mario wears. I'm very happy that this is the movie we got. It could have tried to do more than what it could do. This is keeping it simple serves this, and it actually lets them tee up things in the future a lot easier, because all the heavy lifting doesn't need to happen here. They just needed to get something started, and that's what this movie does.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's really good to hear. I was always going to see this movie, I think, because I've played, I think, every single Mario game since they started, all the way, from the original all the way up to Odyssey. And this is definitely something I was always going to see, but the question was, whether or not I was going to see it in theaters. And do you think that it's worth going to specifically in theaters? Does the spectacle sort of make that idea win out?
It kind of does, just because I don't know. I would not recommend going to see a Marvel movie in a theater unless you really care. But if you want to go to see a movie in a theater, this is the one right now, until like the season starts. Like for you, I don't know. Like there's other things that you would maybe want to see in a theater over this. But if you got nothing going on, this is a perfect matinee movie. It doesn't offend. It doesn't stick around too long. So yeah, you could easily just use like an hour and a half of your day and then still have more things to do and not feel like a piece of crap after you walk out of it. Because it doesn't reinvent the wheel, because the wheel rolls fine, and there's going to be something that you'll get out of it, even if it is just like a small like wave of elation at the recognition of that's what that is. That's obviously Yoshi in his shell. Why is he there? Why isn't he opened up yet? Well, dummy, because he's not in this movie yet, but he's gonna be. And you know what I mean? Like I'll spoil that, but just know that like everybody is there, everything is honored, and there's gonna be something to come back for. Like they got their hooks in me, I guess. I'm interested in seeing whatever the Zelda movie is gonna be, but I would hope that Shigeru Miyamoto would give them some more room to play with Zelda, because that's the games that truly have emotional resonance of all of Nintendo's games, and more lore to work with. So I maybe wouldn't trust Illumination with Zelda. I'll say that. I don't know who I would trust with Zelda, but if you're gonna make a CG animated family film, you can't. But then again, this isn't just a family film. This is a love letter for Nintendo fans. It's a lullaby for a generation. Just approach it from that angle.